Hello, hello, hello. It is so great to be back here at the Whistle Stop. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the editor-in-chief at the Voice of San Diego. Yeah, thank you. It's a very San Diego day. There is Comic-Con started today. The Del Mar races started today, the hats and all that. And then, of course, the live podcast, right? All right. Yeah, it's probably the most prominent of all of those. Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. As a nonprofit news organization, we depend on about 56% of our revenue comes from just individuals. And so if you are one of our members, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, thank you so much for your support. Those of you who don't, I hope you just feel a little tug, just a little worry, a little feeling that maybe you should consider donating, because none of this happens without the support of the people who value this kind of work. Let's see. If you're not a member, please consider joining. I also want to thank the Whistle Stop. I already did that, didn't I? We are also very thankful to the Whistle Stop. Whistle Stop, cheers. The Whistle Stop is donating 10% of tonight's tab to Voice of San Diego and public service journalism. So drink responsibly, but also realizing that you're doing good. Also, I just wanted to thank all the people who are joining us, so I'm going to call them to the stage. The newly minted journalist of the year, an exceptionally bad producer of content on Twitter.com. He has even worse takes about food and voting, and he roots for the two worst teams in baseball. Welcome to Andrew Keatts. She has a lot of thoughts about tacos. A lot of talk about tacos. She does not want your feedback on grammar. I'm serious. Don't send her grammar stuff. She makes us all look smarter than we are. She's the managing editor of Voice of San Diego, Sara Libby. He'll work for 6 months to try to bring a big company to Amazon, like Amazon, to San Diego, but he'll remind you tactfully there are better ways to spend our time. He's the CEO of the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation. He's Mark Cafferty. That's good. And she's one of the most powerful members of the state legislature. She's the head of the Appropriations Committee. She's also the chairwoman of the Select Committee on Women in the Workplace and vice chair of the Latino Caucus. She is... Her husband has been looking for the job and interviewing for the same job for the last 2 years. She's Lorena Gonzalez. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. So we wanted to start with some news. I'm going to start. Andrew's got one and Sarah's got one too. Vacation rentals.
Good Lord.
In a dramatic shift, the San Diego City Council voted 6-3 Monday to allow only residents who live in homes in San Diego to rent them out to visitors for up to 6 months every year. Councilman David Alvarez, Chris Cate, and Scott Sherman voted no. The policy vastly changes what someone has to go through to rent out a home they own to visitors. Unless they find a loophole, it will eliminate all vacation rentals owned as second homes or investment properties. Mark, how important are vacation rentals to the visit? Oh, let's start with the visitor economy. So you talk about the economy all the time and all these structures in the economy, the defense industry, the visitor industry. Do we have any sense of how important this addition was to the visitor industry?
I think we don't, to be honest with you. So our visitor industry, our tourism industry, is one of our three largest economies. It is a major tax revenue system for the city of San Diego. But there's been conversations happening ever since VRBO and Airbnb started to become more and more mainstream from folks on the hotel side who have some critical things to say about that, but also from people in neighborhoods who feel that some who feel they should be able to rent their homes out, and that should be part of their income, and they own the home and they have the ability to do that, and others who see it in a lot of ways as something that can be challenging in the neighborhoods.
Did you have any vacation rentals nearby that were bothering you?
Me personally, no.
No.
So how about you?
No, we're good. My house used to be a vacation rental, and so when we moved in, there were a ton of like code enforcement complaints on it. And then our neighbors are like, "Oh, it's good now. It's cool now." Okay, so when you describe the economy, Mark, you've done this for me a few times. What are the pillars of San Diego's economy? We talk about the military. How big a deal are some of these in comparison with each other?
Huge. So the military economy is the largest by way of the number of people who it employs and the multiplier effect that it has. The tourism economy employs a lot of people. Lorena and certain folks have championed for a long time that it's an industry that has a lot of jobs that are in the lower wage area. The innovation economy, which is sort of the clustering together of all the different clusters that we speak about, like biotech and high tech and clean tech. But San Diego broadly has a very big innovation economy. But the real anchors here are small business. We're 98% small business across San Diego, even within those sectors that we just talked about. The majority of our businesses are small businesses. The border plays a critical role in our economy. The ocean and the proximity to Asia when it comes to the military and some things plays a critical role. So lots of things that factor into San Diego's position as an economy.
Lorena, did you care at all about the vacation rental debate?
Since leaving Pacific Beach about 10 years ago, not really. No, not a lot of vacation rentals in City Heights. I think people are missing out on what San Diego is really like. Thank you. They should be. But no, I did. I actually am concerned that this move to unregulated Airbnbs throughout our neighborhoods are destructive. I'm concerned, and I don't think we have a good handle on how much housing it's taking up, and I think that's very real, especially when we started talking about how controversial the debate was, whether you're going to rent out your house versus your second house. It kind of ties in with something we've been dealing with at the state that we couldn't get through, and that's that you get a mortgage deduction interest in two houses. So we're talking about a lot of loss of revenue, I think, when we talk about, these are basically, you're getting tax deductions, you're renting it out, you're taking away housing stock. So yeah, that concerns me. And I think now that we're increasing union density in our hotels rapidly in San Diego, I'd like to see people utilize those first.
So if vacation rentals had unionized, would this be a different debate?
Anything that unionizes creates a different debate for me.
All right.
That's me.
Sarah, we were a little surprised they did something this week, right?
They did do something, which was unusual.
All right. Andy has a news bit that was right up Ms. Gonzalez's angle.
Yeah. So the Metropolitan Transit System is now pursuing a tax increase to put on the 2020 ballot. Last year, an obscure piece of legislation carried by someone
provoked by an obscure online news operation.
Yeah, made it possible for MTS to levy taxes, and last week, MTS took the first step to making that happen. So the executive committee voted last Thursday to basically sign a contract with a company that's going to start putting together what a ballot measure for 2020 might look like, probably sales tax that would be targeted at just transit improvements. So, Assemblywoman, is this what you had in mind?
Well, I will say, watching what's happening at MTS, and this is just a small piece, watching Georgette Gomez take over as chair and Mona Rios take over as vice chair, seeing that they're paying attention to real issues that affect transit riders, real issues not only in how much transit we have, because we have to increase our transit, but also what's happening on those transit ways. We've seen them actually looking into harassment that's happening on trolleys. This is exactly what we had in mind. We knew that our underserved communities have relied and really promoted transit for long time. And as we talk about moving forward to an economy, a green economy, and trying to reach our climate change goals, this is something we have to invest in. So I'm excited. I think it's a good step. I want to remind people early on that that includes not only transit, but the streets upon which that transit rides. So that was an important part of ensuring that they could tax for, and that's that we can fill some potholes that are caused by buses as well.
So yeah, last set of amendments there. That was a canny addition at the end.
We threw in some things at the end to sweeten the pot a little.
So do we know how it works? Like, what would be the jurisdictions that vote on that tax?
It's a good question, Assemblywoman. I defer to you. Do you know the answer to that? I've talked to people. That seem to think it's quite a complicated
It is
question.
quite complicated, and so it is one thing that actually we got a lot of pushback by our Senate Local Government Committee to basically ask me, do you know what you're doing here? And I'm like, of course not. We just read that Tahoe once did it, and that you can create this sub-taxation system, and they said, yeah, they provided the legislation to do it, but nobody's actually done it. So what it will require is the cities that are served by MTS, which I don't know if I can name them all, but basically the southernmost cities, including the city of San Diego, but everything south of this and a little bit east of this, not all the way into Alpine or anywhere, but Santee, I think, and La Mesa.
Well, the thing is, they do have contract bus routes that run out to Alpine. That's where it starts to get complicated.
And that's what so it's going to be up to MTS to, the legislation specifically states it'll be up to MTS to designate what would fall into that. And then to notify, for example, the businesses that fall into that to know once, that happened, and also to notify the registrar on who would be voting, if that makes sense. So it won't be, for example, the entire city of Alpine, but it may be along the bus route.
So how involved do you anticipate being at this point? Is this the type of thing you hand off and you walk away and you say, my work here is done, or do you want to be in the room?
Look, after AB 805, I kind of told folks who really wanted it, and we worked with in our South Bay community in particular, in the city of San Diego, and even the mayor's office, who's, I'm not going to say he wanted it, but quietly went along with it.
He did not veto it when it came up for a resolution and was passed.
He was about the most excitement you're going to get from there.
Yeah, it was almost like
to Sarah's point.
If I'd waited 2 more years, he might have actually proposed it. So I'm just saying.
I thought you guys were on good terms.
We're in great terms. I don't say he's terrible. He's just not brave. Hey. That's the
shots fired.
No, that's not shots. That's not shots. It's a different governing style, and it's one which has been true to San Diego for a long time, and hopefully will change. He's a nice guy. He's just a Republican.
Why am I here?
A yacht club loving
Mark,
Republican.
I got one for you. Hang on.
You represent the old San Diego, Mark.
So.
In fact, I'm having a beer in his honor.
Yeah.
I think the folks I talked to, I said, look, we'll do this. We were very involved. People who know my legislative package know I like to carry really big, what I find to be important bills. And we actually got laughed at by the governor's office. Like, this is your priority? I was like, yes, regional transportation is my priority. We're doing this. And so kind of after that, I said to folks involved, like, it's on you now. If there are changes and tinkers that need to be made in the law, I'll be happy to do that. But the folks who are representing local government, who are on the ground, really need to work this out. And I'll monitor and watch it, but I'm not going to be in the room.
Yeah, so, Mark, I want to ask you, you supported Measure A, and whatever issues there were with it that we wrote about for a very long time. Your reason for supporting it was very specific. You argued it very articulately, which was that it brings a lot of money to town because it provides this source of revenue that can be leveraged through state and federal grants. Would this MTS measure, which ostensibly would do the same thing, be something you could support for the same reasons?
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I think transportation is as big an economic development issue as we have in San Diego. So housing is huge. Everyone talks about housing. The inability for people to get to where they need to get to in this region makes us non-competitive with a lot of the other regions that people talk about. In fact, when we applied for Amazon and didn't get it, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah,
I came in and talked to you guys, and I remember saying to Sarah, you asked where we were weak, and my very first response was transportation. Is that you look at the other cities, and if you look at a lot of the places where Amazon has chosen to look, whether we truly would have wanted them here or not, bringing 50,000 jobs, people debate that. But when you look at where they are looking to, an awful lot of those places either have a very strong public transit and public transportation already, or are making really strong overtures to invest in it even more to get them.
Well, let me ask you that. Do you think San Diego would want 50,000 middle or high income people to move in here? Because I'm not sure San Diego would want that.
Look, I don't know that first of all, I don't think they're going to grow 50,000 jobs. I think the reality for anyone who followed that is they talked about needing millions of square feet. Coming out of the gate, they were looking for 500,000 square feet. And for those of you who know the density of folks kind of working in an office environment, you can think of how many jobs that's going to be. Their commitment is to try to build over time. It took them 12 years to build to that size in Seattle. And if any of you have been to Seattle, you can see the major significant challenges and problems that density, argue whether it was planned or not planned the right way, what it's done to Seattle in the past decade or so. So there's great job growth up there. There's a buzz about Seattle that a lot of people still like to be a part of, but when you're on the ground talking with folks in Seattle, the reason Amazon's looking outside is their belief is the city did not invest enough in infrastructure for them. The city's belief is you've done quite well. You could invest more in infrastructure here, and that's what's made them choose to go elsewhere. But I think in San Diego, the thought that we could absorb 50,000 jobs would be a huge challenge. But again, going back to the day that we had met when we were talking on the last podcast months back, it's an effort like that can get our region and our lawmakers and the private sector and public sector rallied around something to be thinking differently in the right way about priorities.
Yeah. So when you look at the region, you talked to all these businesses. Where do you see the biggest problems with transportation right now? What businesses, what areas of town, what regions are crying the most in the sense of needing assistance?
An awful lot of the Assemblywomen's district. I mean, the San Diego in some ways is laid out in what people would see as a beneficial way when you're looking at it from far away. There's no one pocket of employment that dominates, so therefore not everyone is trying to get to sort of one place. It's very spread out. The problem is, historically, the neighborhoods that have the most density, that have the most people living there, are really disconnected from where those pockets of employment are. So as a region, we need to do a better job of spreading out even further where the job growth is happening, or do a much, much better job of looking at the commute patterns and trying to figure out how we get people from, I hate to use north and south of the 8, but people south of the city of San Diego and in the southern part of the city of San Diego to be able to move wherever they need to go to get to employment opportunities and across the border, which plays a significant part in our economy as well. So, it's a huge issue across the county. I don't think there's any places that are really well served other than the Qualcomm Stadium site, which has nothing going on right now, but a great trolley stop right there. So otherwise,
man, you had to do that.
Yeah,
you got to bring that up. All right.
It does. It's got a great trolley stop.
Did you pick a team on that?
On Mission Valley?
Yeah. You a soccer city guy?
I'm an education guy. I don't know where my guess is I don't know that either of those. I'll just say it. I don't know that either of those is going to get across the finish line in November. And if it didn't, and we had to come back to the drawing board and get people back together, I think there's no denying that SDSU or university presence or multiple university presence on that site has the most significant impact on economic development. If you have a stadium, great. People like stadiums. They like them for soccer. They like them for SDSU football. It will never be the anchor or cornerstone of that site. So to me, I think that education plays a critical role in the future of that site, and it could be an amazing thing for San Diego.
Well, now I have to ask, Lorena, did you pick a team there?
I don't know if you remember when last time I was in at Voice, I told you guys I was not going to engage.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I don't remember that.
I'm not even going to.
You're not used to her saying that, right?
I ask my husband almost every day when this comes up, I'm like, wait, so Sudbury's on what side? Because I'm on the other side of him. Just joking.
Shots fired.
You know, when people come
He's on
after
the
us.
non-soccer side.
No, but then I think my brother's an attorney on one side. I don't even know what side. Honestly, I'm like, handle it.
Yeah.
But the new president of San Diego State came in, and she, of course, does not lobby for either side, but was advocating for education.
Yeah, of course.
And so I almost got pulled into it.
Total arm's length. Yeah.
And I'm sure labor has a view, and whoever has a PLA is probably best.
All right, Sarah did a compilation of some interesting comments from federal judges. What happened, Sarah?
Yeah, so on Monday, in two different cases in San Diego's federal court, federal judges really just couldn't contain their anger and frustration at the influx of immigration cases we're seeing under this new zero tolerance policy, where everyone who's caught crossing the border is charged in criminal court instead of just handled through the immigration system. And it's caused all kinds of problems. People are being held as far away as Arizona, which means that they're not being brought into court on time, and all other kinds of issues. So in one of the cases, which our reporter Maya Sir Christian attended, the various agencies involved, the Marshal Service, ICE, Border Patrol, they couldn't agree on who should go get this young kid and bring him into court. And so, you know, in the confusion over who needed to go get this kid, court was dragging on for about 40 minutes. They finally brought him in, and there were all kinds of other problems. This is in open court when things are supposed to be going smoothly. And finally, federal judge Gonzalo Curiel had enough. And he said,
I remember him.
Yeah, so this was the judge in the Trump University case, who Trump had said, you know, couldn't possibly be unbiased in immigration
because he was from
cases.
Indianapolis.
Right. So, if anything, I think he's probably been bending over backwards to hold in all of his frustration, you know, lest he be seen as biased. So he finally just kind of erupted and said these were all problems resulting from zero tolerance. And he told the government prosecutor, he even felt kind of bad for him and said, look, I know this is all a product of this administration deciding that they want to do things a certain way, and they haven't been well thought out. As a result, there's not an infrastructure in place for much of what is going on, and time again, we're seeing that there are problems developing, and this is yet another unanticipated problem. I don't know if you guys follow a lot of court cases, but that's basically like as spicy as federal judges will ever get. So, and then we saw another judge, Dana Sabra, who is handling the family separation case, also just basically in the next courtroom or building over the same day, basically just lost it on the administration when it argued that bringing children together more quickly would actually harm the children. And he was not having that argument and said, you created this problem, like how dare you suggest that fixing it would be worse for the children. So it's getting heated.
So speaking of spicy, one of the spiciest Twitter feeds these days is from this guy, actually. You lost it with Trump too. You're done with that, right?
No, I never started with it. I'm not done with it. I mean, it's just, that's a train wreck. I mean, I think.
But it's interesting to see. It feels like you really did tap into something spicy about it. Like you really feel like
swearing on Twitter a lot and stuff.
Yeah. Well, you really feel like people need to see a perspective on it, right?
Yeah. No. I mean, I think what's happening in Washington is horrible, and this is not a room that I have to tell that to quite very strongly. But the reality on the border issues, and normally you hear our mayor engage, you hear our chamber engage on border economic issues, and we do too. Anybody who tells you otherwise, that border is a critical part of our economy. Culturally, it's a critical part of who we are. I mean, everything that we all know that is not being represented in Washington is what becomes frustrating for me. This, though, is criminal. I mean, what's happening on the border right now to children, separating out the economic economic stuff, separating out an economic development discussion. I have 6 and 8-year-olds. We all have kids up here. I just can't grasp it, and that's kind of where I lose it. As I watch someone whose behavior is so far gone, and nobody willing to stand up back there and say that. And I know he doesn't read my tweets, so I can kind of say whatever I want. But at the end of the day, that just is. And I don't think anyone in my world is frustrated. At least they haven't told me they're frustrated with me.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you ever hear from people?
No. I hear from a couple of conservatives in San Diego who say, "Oh, I'm going to D.C. Do you want me to tell President Trump you said hello?" And I just say, "No, I'm good."
Yeah.
But that's about it. I mean, I don't think, I just think that there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's just a lot of people who could be saying more, who are in powerful positions, not doing it. And I credit the state of California a lot. I mean, people can debate that all they want. I hear people in my world say we're putting a target on our back when the state of California fights back against Trump. We are the biggest economy in the country walking away. Nobody's close to us in California. So, to quote the assembly member, I would just say, "Bring it on." But but I think the reality is, I don't think anything that we could do to try to court that administration at that level has any favorable outcomes for California or San Diego.
What's the sense in your district these days?
Oh,
Very pro-Trump, right?
I gotta tell you, we watched this documentary last night on Obama's last year, and Nathan thought I was snoring, so he's like, "Did you fall asleep?" And I was sobbing, right? And I was like, "No, I'm crying." When during the campaign, I go to a lot of schools, and we'd have a lot of, especially middle school students, who would ask me what's going to happen when Trump wins, and I'd say, "Oh, he's not going to win. He's not going to win. Don't worry."
Same way.
Because what do you tell kids, right? Don't worry, but get people in your family who can vote registered. We went through the whole thing, and on election night, I remember just the immense guilt and pain I felt, and can't imagine, and you can't imagine in a district where about 1 out of every 4 households is a mixed status household, what people fear. But see, that's one issue, right? That's an issue. And seeing the Border Patrol go around our district and tear parents away from their kids and it be recorded, that was devastating. But to think about what's happening at our border, I think a lot of people don't understand or don't even think through immigration law. The way to gain asylum is to present yourself at the border and to present yourself with your family and seek asylum. And they're treating those folks like they're breaking the law. That is a legal way to immigrate to the United States. And the thought that that they're pulling these families apart, and for those who are, even if you want to say you have a zero tolerance and this is a crime, okay, well, it's a crime. It's a misdemeanor right now. And so if we all think and we're all comfortable with every time you have a bad jaywalk or a DUI that you're separated from your children are put into a facility, that we're okay with that, that's what we should be looking at like that. And of course we'd say no. So when people start to make these arguments about don't break the law, and it just, there's so much involved with why people are continuing to come. I have never felt like we would be in a country that would choose to do something so lacking in humanity. And I think that that's what this issue has brought about.
Okay.
But we're in a bar, so let's drink.
Yeah.
Like a neat
No, it's we are going to change directions a little bit, play a game. It's time to play Not San Diego, where you identify the thing that is not true about San Diego in California politics. Right now, I need some audience volunteers. Does anybody want to play out there? Yeah, you're in? All right, come on up to the mic here. No, over there.
Yeah.
Over there.
Here we go.
Okay, what's your name?
Deborah.
Deborah. Hello, Deborah. What part of town do you live in?
City Heights, Kensington.
Oh, okay. There you go. And what do you do?
I'm an audio engineer, so hey.
Oh. We could have used you. No.
You're good.
It's working great. It's working great. Oh, my gosh. I was nervous about the audio, but it's working out.
It's working great.
Okay, so what we're going to do is read several options here of things that are true, and one of them's not true. So Sarah has this one. Sarah will start.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time trolling the Secretary of State website for various ballot measures that are out there in the world, as I'm sure we all do, right? It's like one of your guys' hobbies also.
On a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Clear a little time for yourself.
So one of these is not a measure that is currently cleared by the California Attorney General to collect signatures in hopes of making it on a statewide ballot.
Okay. Is it A, that'll teach those smug lawmakers, a measure that would make it illegal to pay teachers less than state legislators?
Is it B, CalExit? The California Self-Determination Referendum Act would ask voters whether they want California to become its own country.
Is it C, from jungle to circus, a measure would double the number of the candidates who make it advance from a primary to the general election from 2 candidates to 4?
Or is it D, continued employment for the tooth fairy? A measure that would prohibit the government from treating public drinking water with fluoride.
Oh.
Threw a curve at you, didn't we?
I don't think we're capable of reading them again. So, that was very, you don't know what went into that.
Oh, I'm sure.
So just
It is A. That'll teach us lawmakers, although just to be clear, that was a proposed ballot measure, but it has already failed to collect its signatures by the required date.
That makes sense.
All right. Yes.
No.
That was the 3 Californias.
That's 3 Californias.
This is to make California its own independent republic.
I thought we had an amendment from the floor right there. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
No, but that's good news. I mean, we have. I don't think I've ever seen this. The Supreme Court did weigh in today on a measure that would have allowed us, and was going to be on the November election, to vote on 3 Californias. And what the Supreme Court said is they haven't ruled it unconstitutional quite yet, but they decided to go ahead and pull it, which probably means they'll rule it unconstitutional because it would first have to clear 2/3 of the legislature. So.
Right. They're basically saying, like, if you can change the Constitution, but you can't revise the whole Constitution without checking with the legislature, right? Okay. Deborah, thank you so much. Have it up.
Thank you, Deborah.
All right, who's next? Who wants to volunteer?
Anybody?
Next one up. All right, let's do it.
This is my favorite.
The trolley, it will be lots of fun, and I can have your pretty face next to me all the way home. You know, San Diego's the best and the ocean's not far, and to get ourselves around we'll use a compass card. We just tap our compass cards before we board, and then the San Diego Sea, it will be ours to explore. Cause I wanna ride the trolley with you. I wanna ride the trolley with you.
Okay.
What the hell was that?
That's my favorite song.
That's Sarah and my favorite song.
Yeah, if you don't know, that is a produced song from the MTS system.
Criminally unpopular MTS.
Yeah, it's real.
Pre-ABO 805.
We play it about once a week in the office, and we decided to blast it here today.
There's a cartoon that goes along with it that very obviously depicts Jason Mraz. Is unlabeled, but very obviously Jason Mraz.
All right, who do we have here?
Maria.
Maria, what part of town are you coming from?
UTC.
So, we are going to list 4 transportation projects. One of them is not actually being contemplated by any of San Diego's major regional planning documents. The other 3 are.
Is it A, because the one at the zoo is dope, right? The transit connection would whisk would-be commuters 35 feet in the air in an aerial gondola that would connect the new trolley station at UTC to the coaster station in Sorrento Valley, carrying them over highways and into the job-rich valleys below.
So that's A.
Or is it B? And bear with me because B is long. So just take the subway. Following the world's best transit systems, this project would go from Little Italy to City Heights, running through the downtown business core, East Village, Balboa Park, Hillcrest, and North Park with high-frequency subway that connects the most densely populated neighborhoods in the city with the downtown jobs cluster. I feel like I just said that earlier. Like we need that.
Yeah, we do. Subway. Is it B, subway, or is it C, Sarah?
Is it C, a step back in time? Are you sick of parking problems at the beach? Well, this project would create an old-timey streetcar from Mission Beach to La Jolla through Pacific Beach. Sure, it would get stuck in traffic, but it will be nostalgic. All for the low, low price of $250 million.
Or is it D? Or is it D?
Right, absolutely right.
One streetcar is good. How about 4 streetcars? San Diego gets the attention, but National City, Oceanside, Chula Vista, and Escondido are dense urban environments in their own right. Let's build downtown streetcars in all 4 cities, and for less than $300 million.
I think B is not being considered.
That is correct. That is correct.
Let's go ride the trolley, it will be lots of fun. And I can have your pretty face next to me all the way home. You know, San Diego's the best and the ocean's not far. And to get ourselves around, we'll use a compass card. We just tap our compass cards before we board. And then the San Diego Sea will be ours to explore. Cause I wanna ride the trolley with you. I wanna ride the trolley with you.
It's a very, very good song.
It's very good.
So I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but I will underline that the joke previously is that that's the good project. Just to be specific.
The subway.
The subway. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, the one that would work. Okay. All right, I need one final volunteer. Hello. What's your name?
Noah.
And what part of town are you coming from?
South Park.
South Park, represent. Is this technically South Park where we're at?
This is technically Greater Golden Hill. The dividing line is Juniper right here, although I think we all know that it's really the canyon. Let's not be absurd, but anyway.
All right. So we've waded into some tough territory. How many say South Park? This is a podcast. You need to say it. How many for South Park? How many for Greater Golden Hill? All right. All right, the final questions.
It's true.
Sandy, no, what do you do?
I'm a cannabis consultant.
Oh, fantastic. This is awesome. California podcast, definitely. Final question. The San Diego Unified School District, sorry, has a...
That made you laugh.
We got a tight relationship these days. They have a giant list of things that they say they need for a new tax increase. It would be a construction bond. It would be $60 per $100,000 of assessed value on your home. That is, it has all but one of these things are on the ballot of things that they would want to build with this tax increase. Which one of these is not actually going to be paid for by the new construction bond? Is it remove lead from school plumbing and provide the cleanest drinking water in the nation? Or is it fortify schools against mass shooters? Or is it provide the solar panels and other improvements to make it use zero net energy? Or is it build swimming pools? Or is it fund the salaries of educators and crucial special education aides? Or is it fund charter school construction? Which one of those is not being provided for in the construction bond?
A through E. Let me do my math real quick. AstroTurf.
No, that'll probably
buy some.
They'll probably do that. That wasn't on there, by the way.
The tricky one?
No, they say they're going to do that too. They say they've been doing that for a while. So the one that they won't do is fund the salaries of educators and crucial special education aides.
Well, technically, you can't do that with a bond.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. It's a construction bond. That was kind of the joke. But Noah, thank you for joining. That one felt serious. Lorena, I wanted to ask you about it. You were very prominent on the lead issue.
Yes.
You brought him in. You talked to him. You were upset about some of the news about lead being found in the water schools. What do you think about this project and about their promises now to take care of it?
Well, I think it's important in every school across California is now dealing with this because we wrote a bill last year to force schools to actually test for lead. And what we found is it's not just a San Diego problem. It's a problem in San Francisco and Santa Barbara and Marin, up and down the state. And it's a real big problem in Central Valley. So the good news is we're not going to send our kids to school and poison them. That's a positive. I think. Dark. It actually was very dark discussions about this. I mean, literally, and you have to understand, we talk about lead in water in a global kind of way. We've been talking for years about getting sugar-sweetened drinks out of our schools, right? And we keep saying, well, the kids can go drink water. I'm sorry, I want a fat kid over a dead kid. Literally, we never even thought through whether we're actually providing them with something safe to drink, and this was a real big problem. And parents weren't being informed when they were testing and getting high levels, and so I think parents have the right to know when their kids are being poisoned at school. I'm a mom. So it is. But we have provided resources through the state to help alleviate this need, and low-income schools can apply for grants through the Water Resource Board to redo their piping. So I think that's good. But if they're going to add filters to everything, I haven't seen the bond proposal. I think that's great. I think that they should do that. I think there's a lot of good work that can be done. But and I'm sure I'm going to support the bond.
You sure?
I haven't seen a bond I don't like. It usually means some good jobs.
Fair,
honesty. It's great.
Mark, let me ask you this. So there's three groups that cared about this bond being put on the ballot. There was one group that was worried about historical preservation of a building at the headquarters of the University Heights, the school district's headquarters. There was the labor groups who were interested in doing this work. And then there was Voice of San Diego. Why doesn't anybody else care about this?
Oh, that's good. I don't know. I mean, this one thing I will give a shout out to Voice of San Diego. I have been a huge fan
for a compliment.
of the fact. Absolutely, I'm a huge fan of the fact that you all cover education. Mario, when he was here in town, was one of my favorite people to interact with. I don't know. This is an interesting one because this factors in a different way, even into sort of the work that we do. So. One of the things I should have said earlier is really the cornerstone of San Diego's economy is our talent, and that is a truer statement could not be made. When businesses grow here, they grow because they have connectivity to that talent and the talent that can help them grow, and that requires training programs and that requires education and all of those things. And so one of the things that I would say has always been just challenging for me, and when Lorena ran the Labor Council and I ran the Workforce Partnership, we worked on these issues together, is getting people to lean into education, getting people to grasp that when we talk about economic development and workforce development, it really starts and ends with the ability for young people growing up in this community to get the education they need to make the decisions that they make to thrive and grow. And so even in that discussion, businesses will say, yeah, but that's really long term. We need to talk about talent right now, as in where do we find it from somewhere else? And the reality is we can't be a great region and we just can't bring people in from elsewhere and think that solves problems. So I don't know why. I used to have conversations with Mario about this and think that it was just amazing that I would think he put a great report and I'd see that I was one of 3 people who liked it, and I would just and then I'd see something crazy put out and hundreds of people. But that I just don't. I've never been able to figure that out in San Diego, and I don't know that it's a San Diego centric issue. The Assemblywoman might know if it's something that peers are dealing with up and down the state, but getting more people to lean into education and in particular public education is a real need.
Yeah, it is.
My parents were public school teachers, so I got to represent whenever I can.
Lorena, let's talk today. You got a bill signed today.
I did.
She gets a bill signed.
Are there bills that get signed in July? Is this happening?
It does. A small amount of bills make it to the governor's desk. It's a range of things. If it's not fiscal, it can make it to the governor's desk before September. If it's fiscal, it'll have to go through both houses of appropriations, so that would hold it up. Or if in a 2-year cycle, like it is this year, if it already went through the fiscal committees and has just kind of been sitting on one of either the Senate or Assembly floor, it can get moved on to the governors, and that's the case with my bill.
Okay, so this bill basically says that starting in 2019, you don't have to have postage for your mail-in ballot, right?
That's it.
Now, before
You know how to
Andy, you've done some reporting on this situation, right?
Yeah, Andy's trying to throw some water on this bill.
Well, I know he doesn't like people to vote, but
doesn't.
I think him and Chris Reed are going to get together and talk about what's worse, voting or dogs.
Dogs.
Brutal.
There was a columnist in the UT that wrote a piece that dogs are parasites. And what she's comparing that hot take to is Andy's take that people should not vote.
No, in fairness, I think what he wrote is we should
don't help him.
Yeah, let him dig his way out of this one.
I don't think it's any better. I mean, we should
considerably better.
Make people feel guilty for not voting. I'm like, who are you?
Well, set up the story. So you did some reporting on this postage thing, right?
What I said is that it's extremely offensive to suggest that people who do not vote are not entitled to an opinion, that they're still tax-paying residents of our society, and we should understand that other people can take their own responsibility for not inspiring people to vote. That includes the media. That's what I said.
So much more reasonable than what you said.
Yeah, that was not.
That is literally exactly what I said.
It was pretty bad.
All on Twitter, and that's exactly what I said.
All right, well, let's set up this story. So we actually looked into this question because people had it 2 years ago, where if people sent in their postage or their ballot without the right postage, they were worried what happened, right?
Yes, and so I called the registrar, and what Michael told me is that they have a standing agreement with the post office that all ballots will be mailed. That basically the post office just mails it, and then they send the registrar a check, and they get reimbursed. Now, I don't know that that's the case in every county, and I did think it was strange that he said, basically, do you have to report this? Because it could get very expensive if everybody knew that, and we want them to put a postage stamp on it if at all possible. So
it is an agreement with the United States Postal Service that they will, in fact, and if you think about it, you put your ballot in the mailbox, and often without a return address, it just goes to the registrar, and they'll pay for it. Most people don't understand that, don't know that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't want to encourage people to put mail in without a stamp. It's not a good thing to do. But even more important, until recently, California has done so much to encourage voting that it's not as big of a problem, but it also slows down the mail. So that piece of mail is less likely to get the registrar in time to be counted. And so it's not really, if you say, oh, I only need 3 days to get it in, it'll get counted. Now, of course, this year, we changed the law, as we keep changing California, to make voting more accessible, and every vote count. You have up to 3 days till after the election, as long as it's postmarked on the day of election, for your ballot to be received by the registrar. But all of that being said, I really think that the requirement of a stamp to mail a ballot is akin to a poll tax. And as stamps increase, and a lot of people poo-pooed the idea, I understand to 50 cents to somebody isn't a lot. Now, granted, in the last 2 elections, you had to put 2 stamps on, so that's $1. And in my district, and I made the case to the governor, look, now to buy a single stamp, it's not like you can go to the grocery store and ask for a stamp. You have to actually go to the clerk at the post office. They don't even have the machines anymore. So that's open during working hours. You have to go get your 2 stamps for the mail. If not, you have to go to CVS or somewhere else and buy a book of $10 worth of stamps in order to mail your ballot, which you're probably doing because you're too busy to vote on election day. And so it's a barrier. There are about 6 counties in the state that already paid for postage. So it was a disparity in rights between people in a place like San Diego that didn't have postage paid compared to Santa Clara County or San Francisco. So for all those reasons, we really thought it's enough. And I have a 22-year-old, and she mocks me for even knowing where to get a stamp, right? She's like, stamps, aren't those isn't there a collection somewhere? Do I peel it off and put it on? So I know that millennials just don't do stamps. So we always want to, unlike my friend here, I actually think voting is really important, and I do want to guilt people who don't vote. So my way of ensuring I can guilt everyone, I'm a good Catholic, guilt everyone into voting, is to make it as easy and cost-free as possible.
I agree with making it as easy and cost-free as possible.
So I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. I know you get asked all the time about your interest in running for mayor, which is something you've shut down. Is that still happening? That's not my question, actually.
Am I still running for mayor?
No,
I'm totally running for mayor. of City Heights.
Tweet it. Tweet that.
You've spoken really passionately about voting, and this is not the first big voting access issue you've tackled. You wrote the motor voter law. I want to be the one to ask you if Secretary of State is the actual job that you are interested in.
Wow, that wasn't on the list you gave my staff. So we have an election to re-elect our very, very amazing Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. He's done a great job, and he's on the ballot in November 2018 to re-elect him. And so that seat will be open in 2022. And
there you go.
That's not a no. That's not a no.
I love voting. I mean, people who know me.
Still not a no.
I know exactly what I'm tweeting when I leave here tonight. So.
I'm a big believer, actually. I love what I'm doing now, and so it's really hard to say what I'm going to do next one. And I do get a question a lot, and there are a lot of things people, I think, know that I'm interested in Secretary of State as a possibility for my future. But there are a lot of things that come up, and we've seen it throughout San Diego and throughout kind of the world. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that elected officials do is they start looking and planning for that next office right away, and they set in stone, and something comes up. I'll give the example I always use is he's a good friend of mine, but Dave Jones, who's our insurance commissioner. And as long as we knew Dave Jones as insurance commissioner for 8 years, he was running for attorney general.
The old Dave Jones insurance commissioner issues.
Yeah, no, but like he did everything.
Knows about.
Well, if you know, like inside politics, right? So he went and got all the Democratic endorsements and everything. Well, then Kamala Harris takes off, and then the governor appoints Javier Becerra, and suddenly, Dave Jones is polling at like 5% for attorney general. So his lifelong dream is out of his hands. So I just don't believe in doing that. But yeah, I'll probably run for Secretary of State.
Book it.
It's awesome.
Book it. All right. I have a question for you. Is that okay?
Maybe.
We took a couple months ago in the height of your husband Nathan Fletcher's campaign for county supervisor. You used a lot of campaign donations to support his run for mayor, or also
there goes my run for Secretary of State.
No, to support his campaign. And you told me, look, I have the money now, and this is a cause I support. There were a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that thought this was the biggest scandal in the world, and I couldn't identify why. But I think what they would say is like, look, this is unprecedented. This is not something you usually see, this kind of money coming from a spouse and to the party like that. So what would you tell them? I don't think a lot of them are here, but what would you tell them?
Okay, first of all, it's total bullshit, right? So I do want to say that because these same people were sitting in rooms and at the chamber, and not that you were there, sorry. It was not Mark. At the chamber and Lincoln Club, and saying, because I do have friends who actually go to these meetings, and we're saying like, we're going to stop Nathan Fletcher because his wife will control too much. You know what? Like, all right, really? Then I'm going to make sure I spend as much as you do to ensure Democrats get elected, and that's what I did. And I'm sorry, because for years in this city, we have had Republicans outspend Democrats 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, and we've sat by and had a pure stance that we're not playing that game, and we've lost. And I'm tired of it because we need to win in San Diego, and we need to change things, and this community needs to change. And so, yeah, I'm willing to spend my money to elect the person that I know. I mean, and let's be honest, I couldn't tell them where to spend it. I just knew the party had a preference to focus on that race. But I want to elect Democrats, and I think I feel strongly about that. I'm from San Diego County. I grew up here. I believe in this, and I am tired of having a majority of the voters be progressive Democratic voters and lose elections. We have 5 Republican Board of Supervisors. In my job, we do a ton of stuff that sends money to the county to provide for services, and that money doesn't get spent. It gets hoarded and then spent on water parks and new buildings, and it doesn't get to the services that my community needs, that these community needs, that homeless folks needs, that mental health needs. And so, yeah, I'm going to make sure that we change things. So, sorry.
Mark, can you tell us about some of those rooms you were in and the conversations that were going down?
I thought you were going to ask me about the couple $100 I gave to Nathan Fletcher. No, I am not in those. I'm not in those rooms. I don't sit on any of the PACs or the committees that make those decisions. And for folks who probably, most of you may not even know who the EDC is, but as an economic development organization, we are funded almost entirely by large business, but we do not have a PAC. We do not endorse candidates. We do not endorse ballot measures. We do a lot of research that then relates to things that are critical to the economy and put it out there. But Nathan and I go way back, and I've supported Nathan through a few mayoral campaigns, and I've worked with Lorena even longer. So I mean, I think an awful lot of what she just said. There's a need for some changes in this community. The issues that we talked about earlier with education, and and some of the things I was talking about with people beforehand that have to do with communities in San Diego that have just historically been completely disconnected from where decisions get made, where money gets spent, and I think we're seeing that start to change right now.
Let me ask you, so what is the biggest priority or concern in your world right now about making sure that we're supporting those small businesses you talk about and all that? Like where could we do the most work?
So probably in 3 places, and I don't have the answers. I mean, I don't know what the strategies are. I marvel at the lawmaker over here because she gets so much passed. But I think the reality is there's 3 issues that are going to define our economy as we move forward. One is, right now as we speak, 1 in 3 San Diegans is Hispanic. Those numbers are just increasing. We have Latino. Thank you. Hispanic, Latino. And those numbers are only increasing. And that population, when you look at it statistically speaking, is the least likely right now to go into the STEM education-related careers that organizations like mine promote and say are so critical to economic growth. We need to invest there. That's the population that is, in fact, our future workforce. We have to invest there. The second thing is 98% of our businesses are small businesses. Most of the decisions made, most of the organizations like mine historically have been funded by larger businesses in San Diego. And that makes sense. That happens in most places. But when you are a region now that has 98% small businesses, we're outpacing the rest of the nation in new jobs created by new businesses being created. This is an entrepreneurial region. We need to figure out how to develop policies and strategies that support small and emerging businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and so on. And then the third piece is transportation and housing. I mean, these are the issues that will sort of define who we are as a region in the future. And so the affordability of San Diego is probably the most critical issue, whether it's Qualcomm or Sempra saying we can't maintain talent because they can't afford to live here, and that's actually a very real conversation with 2 of our biggest companies in San Diego, or small businesses feeling like they can't compete because of the what they want to pay their workers and what they want to be able to pay in wages, but basically the inability to get some of the contracts and the opportunities with those surging parts of the economy that I spoke about earlier.
Well, there's one type of infrastructure that nobody mentioned, and that's media. It really is a form of infrastructure. It really is. You can't understand any of these topics. People can't have access to them, and the complexity involved in some of them actually is a form of elitism that keeps people from participating. And so if you care about any of these things, please care about the media. Please invest in the media, even if it's not us, if it's whatever organization provides the kind of shared reality that helps us make these decisions and make improvements in our community. It's vital. So I wanted to shout out to Mark Cafferty for joining us. Thank you. And Lorena Gonzalez.
Can I just say, I do have to on your media thing, because I get a lot of credit for the bills I pass, but I think at least one of my bills every year has been a product of reporting by the Voice of San Diego. And it's not just reporting, but the reporting that is done that's in-depth enough, that's specific enough, that's qualified enough to allow a lawmaker to look at it and say, oh my gosh, we can do something about, we need to do something about that. So thank you for the hard work that you do, and all the staff at Voice of San Diego. It is phenomenal reporting.
And Sara Libby, thank you for joining us again. Thank you, Lorena, by the way. Thank you. And Andrew Keatts. No more clapping for him. Thank you for coming.